Welcome to the Cracking the Growth Code podcast, where we explore practical growth and leadership insights to take you and your organization to the next level. I'm your host, Matt Zembruski, and I'm pleased to have as my guest today, James Barrett. He's Vice President of Software Engineering for R&D at Ministry Brands with over 3 decades of industry experience. He's passionate about creating and managing agile engineering teams through the complex changes his industry continually experiences in order to produce real impact in the lives of his customers through SaaS. James, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you for having me. Appreciate the intro. Sounds impressive.
It is impressive. It's amazing how that happens, right? I just pulled that right out of my head.
Yeah, you are incredible.
Let's start it off, James, to briefly introduce yourself, what you're doing at Ministry Brands to our audience, sort of what you're passionate about. Just give everyone a little bit more of who you are and what you're up to.
I appreciate the intro, Matt. So, and I'm excited to be on. Excited about the industry. You know, I've been in the industry. Actually, I wrote my first code 40 years ago in high school, GW Basic on a Trash 80, and fell in love, and I've been there ever since. So now I'm the VP of Software Engineering, a fairly large shop, quite a few number of teams with Ministry Brands, and we're doing good work. We're out there helping churches and nonprofits with very big SaaS applications in Azure and AWS, trying to stay as relevant as we possibly can be while not disrupting the flow of support our clients need on a day-to-day basis to make sure they're impacting the community well. So that's something we focus on. We want to be cutting edge, but not so cutting edge that we're disruptive to the business and the community and the work being done, because it's exceptionally important what's going on.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's a really good introduction, and I know you work a lot with nonprofits and churches and things like this. And this is a whole interesting sector, right? For many of us who have played in the for-profit side, but also I've played a little bit in the nonprofit side. There's a lot there. I want to talk about the understand from your perspective about the people side of this. You mentioned you're working with a number of agile engineering teams there, and I'm sure, like myself, you probably interviewed a lot of people over the years. You probably hired a lot of people, had to let a lot of people go. There's just a lot of interaction that you have with people. When you think about hiring someone or building your teams, building your organization, making it bigger and stronger, how do you define leadership when it comes to the organization?
That's actually, it takes a while to unpack that, right? So my personal definition of leadership is when I take leadership of a group, usually a team of teams, not an individual team. I've managed multiple teams across the world, globally for many, many years. And so there's some aspects of leadership that add complexity, multiple time zones, multiple cultures, things of that nature, all coming together to get something done together. So that's a totally different aspect of leadership. But basically, boiling down leadership is, I feel like that I need to be a servant leader, that the people I lead need to be able to trust me, need to see confidence, hear affirmation, be held accountable. And generally, I'm harder on myself than anyone else on the team. And my motivational strategies are positive in nature. As a leader, you have to hold everyone accountable, and there are times when it's just as important that you pull someone aside and let them know they're not helping the team any, and try to delve into that. But in general, I try to inspire a team to see a goal, to pull together a diverse team of skills and personalities, and we go out and slay a dragon together. There's nothing that builds a team better than getting everybody on board with a noble mission. And I look for an easy would be a quick win, maybe not necessarily easy, but something that to build momentum out of. Because I think one of the challenges for agile teams nowadays is software engineering has always been a little bit disruptive. And you add that to the fast-paced changes in our industry, and you're constantly dealing with change. And that's part of the job, right? You need to be able to handle change well. But I find that I like to keep my engineers for a decade, you know. I find that turnover, change when it comes to staff, is very detrimental to building, velocity you can count on. You need to know that each team has a characteristic about it. Part of being a good leader and a good manager is knowing how a team operates and what you can expect it to do. You can't do that if you reorg once a quarter, right? If your staff turnover is, if you can't keep a guy 6 months or any of your contributors, for a significant period of time, you can't build confidence in the velocity and the throughput of a team. So once I build a team, I spend a significant amount of time protecting that team, making sure that we employ the team, to slay that dragon, and anything that gets in the way of that mission or that goal, I try to mitigate in some way or another. Um, Once again, reinforcing that servant leadership. Anyone who works for me should be able to come to me 24/7. They all have access to my cell phone number. I'm completely transparent. And I want to be there at 3 a.m. in the morning when the system's down, helping them in the trenches with them. You can't build loyalty in a team for your leadership, and they won't go to the hard places unless they know you're as invested as they are, unless you're passionate, you're engaged, you're supportive, and you're helpful. I mean, there's a lot, I hate to say this, but a lot of leaders are just not helpful. you know, I may not get everything right, but I'm going to try to help you, So that's a kind of the way I view leadership, particularly in the software engineering domain.
Yeah, you really shared so much there, James. Thank you for going into all that. And clearly, I don't often get into the agile topics. It depends on who I'm having a conversation with. But you and I come from a lot of agile background, and
Right.
you just hit on a number of key aspects of agile leadership and what I really call authentic leadership in today's
Yes.
world. And I want to dive a little deeper into one aspect that you shared about, like building the teams and then protecting the teams. I love that you use that word protecting. I think about that all the time as a scrum master, agile
Right.
coach, what have you, protecting the team. And you're really protecting them from a lot of things, including attrition, right? You don't want the
Right.
team members to leave the organization or move on and things like that. Ideally, you want them to contribute and really form that long-term relationship and just build that, I call it a family, like within the
Yeah.
team. So they're getting that energy. Let's talk about the engagement. What are some of the things that you do to help protect that team, to help really, you mentioned a few, like being in there in the trenches with them, late night releases and things like this. But share a little bit about your philosophy of leadership and how it comes to helping those teams stay actively engaged and want to contribute, to the team and to the organization over the long term.
Right. I find a number of challenges, particularly I mean, I started out as a Fed, then moved to a startup, then went to the public sector, and now I'm with private equity. And I found kind of this dynamic in play in all of those environments, but to a different degree, right? So where I'm at now in private equity, we're a very, very large private equity company. Like 50 acquisitions built us. We have products all across North America, and we're really engaged in some very large enterprises. Our investors have marks they need to hit, and our leadership has marks they need to hit. uh, Almost a waterfall mindset, right? Because there's a certain thing, even when you're the public sector, it's all about the quarter, everyone's accountable at some level, right? There isn't any free money in play anywhere, right? So I try to isolate that engineering team and I think of it as an engine that's producing software. It's gotta be healthy. But once it's healthy and it has a known velocity and a known quality, it's held accountable and it's running well, then make sure that it's being fed good on target specifications, right? I've had agile teams and organizations literally overwhelm the rest of the company with how much software they delivered. Now, most of your introverts are just happy to finish their tasks by the end of sprint, right?
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes if they look up and they realize what they killed themselves to do 3 quarters ago still isn't monetarily impactful for the company three quarters later, they begin to ask, well, what kind of impact am I really having? So I want to make sure that I often sit between this agile engine that's running quickly, a 2 week cycle or whatever, and we're just pouring out the code and it's on target for the product vision over here. I like to sit in the middle between. It's not a comfortable place to sit, by the way. It's a necessary place to sit between this long-term vision and goal communicated to clients, almost waterfall, like we're going to release this in, Q3 or whatever. That messaging, which you can't really get back, once it's out there in front of the client. And this 2 week engine that's pouring out, and it gets more complex when you have 4 or 5 teams that have dependencies that need to hit a time or a capability together. I mean, you obviously don't start there. You start by running one team, right? And then, build up to it. But a lot of modern day ventures, um, done in a big way, require coordination across multiple teams. Those teams might be in different cultures, time zones. So there's a lot of communication that has to happen on the Agile engine side that needs to translate into something that's commercialized and marketable on the business side. And in the middle there's friction, right? If this is in physics, if this is rotating really fast and this is rotating really slow, then there's going to be heat generated in the middle. So I think a good tech leader knows that, puts their own neck on the line in the middle, takes some of that heat, uh, make sure that we're getting the ultimate job done that the business needs, but in the most efficient technical way possible. And a lot of times that's just, and I hate using the word just in the English language because what that does is minimize what you've accomplished. That is clear communication that's culturally appropriate to the cross-functional area you're speaking to. I'm not going to say that to a line developer or a line QA. They're going to go, James, you sound like a manager. What's going on? Did you get your stuff done? Did you test it? Did you have it peer reviewed? Are we, have you passed that off to the build engineer? Are we deploying it through pipelines? That's the language they want to speak, well, the QA was sick. Well, could you find a buddy somewhere to, cover for your teammate, to get us across the line to achieve our objectives? That's a different conversation than, sir, we're going to be three days late on this quarterly objective. We need to, modify our messaging accordingly, and try to get in front of it by taking these so that we can be impactful along our roadmap that we've promised our clients and our investors. That's a conversation I don't have with the technical team, but I definitely don't talk about sprint commitments with, so there's a lot of different languages in this field.
Yeah, so true. And you're in the middle. You're in the middle there. You're
Yeah.
the translator, you're the communicator. And you touched on a lot of aspects that are really important for agile teams to really be healthy today. And one that you alluded to, but we didn't hit on it yet, and I want to ask your opinion on this, is sort of the fast feedback loops that are in Agile,
Right.
ideally with the end customer. And I know that there's a lot of levels or layers before your engineering team or teams would get to the customer, because you have different layers that you would sell through different internal stakeholders, etc., before you finally get to an end customer. So I'm just curious, what are your thoughts on fast feedback loops because it is so important for the developers, the engineers, the people creating the products to know that what they created is being used and it's potentially, hopefully, providing good impact. What is in place, if at all, for fast feedback loops so they can actually hear, not just internally, like, hey, the software you put out was really good, but more like, hey, this is what the customer is actually saying. Are there any type of mechanisms in there that you have in process?
We do have some of those, and I think every company builds those communication channels, whether they're not. And look, in large scale SaaS applications, they know, right? It's on YouTube, it's on social media, it's out there. Many times, some of our employees are members of the organizations we're serving, or aware of them. Some of these are exceptionally large organizations, which you would recognize immediately if I said so. The economic impact, sometimes you have to stop the team a little bit and say, hey, not only was that great, the commitment you hit, but it's having a real impact on the end user. Sometimes I'll bring that message, sometimes the product owner, but if all of the pieces are there, if there's a human, in every slot for all of that mechanism, there's really not a problem. I find that in modern software engineering, and it's not really new, it's been for decades, you've got this constant push and pull between profitability, staffing, and roles, right? So you have this perfect vision of a fully staffed organization with full QA, a full software engineering, and a scrum master, and a product owner, and a product manager, and marketing, and each one of these organizations, if they're fully staffed and have been working together for a long period of time, harmonize over time. Yeah, you got your storming, forming, norming, and that doesn't just apply to a Scrum team, it applies to the entire organization. But if you have enough stability in your organization and it's funded well enough to supply key roles, everyone's accountable for their part of the mechanism, then it runs quite smoothly. Where we run into trouble is there's always a funding or a turnover problem or something like that where somebody's wearing two hats. And over the years, or three hats or four hats, and over the years, I have noticed that combination of hats can be quite creative. Uh, you can have a developer that functions as a QA, or a Scrum Master, or product owner role in many cases, and sometimes that's not the exception, that's the rule, right?
Wow.
So then it gets very hard to delineate roles and responsibilities when you don't have enough people for the roles and responsibilities that ideally you'd implement.
Mm.
And so that's a challenge with everyone, right? And I'm sure every industry has their variation of that challenge. So there's a balance, right? But once again, if you can reduce attrition, if you can identify a dragon to go slay, if you can celebrate your wins together, if there's no us and them, but we're all winning together or we're all losing together, there's accountability and integrity, you can make up for a lot of, atypical structures, let's just say.
I love that, James. I love the way you describe that and the way you summarize that. And it's there. Let's talk about hiring for a minute. When you get into the hiring aspect of it, we talked a lot about sort of once the people are there and how do you keep them there and so forth. On the hiring side, when you're going to hire someone new to join your organization, whether it's another leader that you're hiring in or whether it's a team member, individual contributor, what are the top three attributes that you look for in a candidate in an interview?
I don't really have a 1, 2, 3, but I can tell you my process is I'm a people person. I want to know who's sitting across the desk from me. I want to acknowledge in the back of my head ahead of time that interviewing is a skill set. And a lot of introverted, fantastic software engineers, QA people, all of these aspects. Not so much once you get into project management, product management. The people skills have to be there for that. But a lot of those people, they don't interview a lot, and they're not good at interviewing.
Mhm.
So my challenge is to sit down at the table and go, okay, here's a person I want to get to know, and I don't have that much time to know who they are. I want to lower the anxiety level because it's nerve-wracking being in front of you feel evaluated and judged. There's a lot of really good contributors that would really greatly impact the efficiency of the organization, be tremendous hires that are not going to interview well. So what I try to do is get past that and find out what they really do on a day-to-day basis, what they've really done. And I try to immediately move for that highly technical introvert into technology.
Mm.
Then I want to see their eyes light up, right? Because they may be a poor communicator, but if you're talking about what language you write in, what this framework is, which cloud you prefer, how you do build deploys, at some point you should spark some passion,
Mhm.
right? It may be poorly articulated passion, but you need to see the eyes light up, right? And if I don't see that, I tend to think that maybe that person needs to be on more of the extroverted scale. If I get in an interview with someone and they're just super eloquent and personable and outgoing, then that might be a need in the company. But I find that sometimes rarely married with a deep introverted creative.
Mhm.
Now, I don't want to exclude any talented individual, so you've got to untangle that. And I just start talking. I mean, and I know, a lot of people get in an interview and start talking with a senior leader and think, well, he tricked me, or they tricked me, and if the truth comes out, that's not a trick. That's just lowering the anxiety level and increasing the level of communication so that two people can see each other better. Uh, Also, as a hiring manager, I have to give myself permission to make a mistake every once in a while.
Mhm.
I sat down across the table with people to evaluate their technical skills and just been completely blown away.
Mm.
And they've turned out to be non-contributors. They had the ability, but I couldn't inspire them to be engaged and be productive. And at the end of the day, it's what you give to a team, not
Mhm.
what you're capable of giving, but what you actually give to a team that actually counts. Uh, Team members will not respect a highly talented contributor that's not contributing, right? You're meeting them every day for stand up. There's no illusions in that small, highly accountable group. Everyone doesn't have to be the same, but if you're going to show up and say, "Oh, I'm so technical and I can do all these things," that's great. That makes the team feel stronger. But unless they see you contributing, it doesn't translate. Uh,
Yeah,
so that's a lot to unpack in an interview, but that's what I try to go for.
I love that. I love that how you set the stage with your initial goal. I'm a people person as well, and I think very similar to the way you do. When I conduct interviews, it's like number one, let's make the person feel comfortable. Let's get to know them as a person.
Right.
Really, you mentioned passion in the beginning. Like everybody's got to be passionate about something. If maybe they
Right.
haven't found it yet, right? But hopefully they've figured out what their passion is. Maybe it has to do with the role that they're applying for. But really diving into where that passion is for them, what gets them out of bed in the morning and gets them excited for that. And when you can uncover that, make them comfortable in an interview. It's just I love the way you describe the process, and I want to talk a little bit more about. You alluded to the company culture and the team culture, right? Related to we all work hard on it. Every team has its own ethos, right? And
Right.
and and you want not just someone who could be a great contributor but doesn't fit in the culture, but someone who can be a great contributor and also work together like as part of that family, as part of that team, and really communicate and work together. So um, just share your thoughts on the team culture and organizational culture. What are some things that your philosophy there? Some of the things you built into your organization You've alluded to a few things, different points of our conversation today, but talk a little bit about culture, because that's important for the teams and the organization as a whole.
Yeah. So when I'm, let's say I fill in at different roles depending upon who's available, who's not. So when I'm running a team, it's important that there is a sense of professionalism and respect for each member that's there, right? And as a manager, I don't want to go in and get in the weeds and stop that self-organization principle that's so important to Agile. You put 5 or 6 people in a room, virtualized anymore, uh, they're going to storm, form, and norm and come out with a configuration that's probably going to surprise you a little. But if they're in harmony with it, it's a known quality contributor, and it works for them, then respect that. Show a little bit of elasticity. Well, maybe the senior's not as productive as you want to, but the junior and they work really well together is super productive. And it's a great, value add the way they work together. Maybe they favor a particular QA who has many years of experience, or maybe there's a young QA that's just jumping on everything to learn the process. That's going to look different from team to team. So you have to not get in the way of that process and look for that team to self-organize. Now, if they're not gelling, then I step in and I start changing things to figure out why that might be the case. But there's no room in any organization that I'm managing for disrespect of one another. I'm all for healthy banter and jokes and everything else like that, but I look for negative behavior because that really tends to poison a team. If everyone's defensive when they show up once a day to meet with their peers and talk about what they've done, that's not a culture you're going to get something beautiful out of, right?
Yep.
When I see a team say, "Oh, John is sick," or "John's mother is sick," let me take that and cover for him, knowing that he'll get me back and he's a team member. When I see that happen, I don't have any worries. The team is beginning to support themselves, and then that's very important to protect, because no company wakes up one day and says, "I'd like to destroy the productivity of this hard-fought group." But there are dynamic forces in the industry that end up doing that if you're not careful. So that's a little bit of how I lead a team. Um, Recently, well, within the last year, I stepped into a team that had lost their development manager. They happened to be a lamp stack, tech stack, and it had been a little while. I had some rust on me technically. We had no build engineer. We were using Azure DevOps. So I stepped in and I was a developer. I was the build engineer. I was the release manager, which was great because it kind of regrounded me into the positions within the team. And I'm still drawing off that refresher course that I had. I think I busted out 6 quick, small, rapid releases in a quarter and found the highest consuming SQL in the cloud and got it fixed. So that was great for a little tour down into the weeds. Now I don't get to operate there, everyone. And there are times when a team will just call me out and say, "James, you're too rusty. We used to do that 15 years ago. Now here's the better way to do it." I need that. I need someone confident enough in our relationship to say, "That's not how we do it anymore. Watch me." And that's another aspect of leadership or anyone in the technical field. I think anyone anywhere, you need to be a lifelong learner and not have so much pride that you're not willing to upgrade your thoughts, your skill process, whatever. I mean, I'm not writing assembly language on mainframes anymore. I have to continually upgrade, right? I'm spending a lot of time figuring out what this new generative AI is going to do to the industry, and how to adapt to that. That was not part of my vocabulary 5 years ago. So constantly upgrading and not being too proud to learn and finding safe areas to make mistakes, right? You got to have a team that can just absolutely destroy their lower environment and replace it with imaging and say, "That didn't work. And that try-fail cycle is really key to higher velocity with your team. If you're in an environment where everyone's afraid to make a mistake, even what you produce, even if it's fantastic, it's going to be slow. It is not going to be agile, and it's going to be timid, right? And that is a team, but it's not optimal, right?
Yeah, not high performing at all. Yeah, there's so much there's so much value that I'm getting from our conversation here. I'm really excited to share all this with our audience. As we wrap up, James, let's summarize. You brought up a number of great points for leaders, team members, for anyone in agile organizations. And so if we were to summarize it to our audience of current and future leaders out there, what are the top 3 tips you have for them to bring out their best as leaders in their careers, in their lives? What are sort of your top 3 aspects of leadership that you feel people should lean into?
I feel like there needs to be a servant component to every leadership. It's a responsibility to be a leader. If you make a mistake as a leader, you're not the only one that pays, right? Every parent knows that, right? And it's not a parent-child relationship by any means, but you're responsible for more than you. Okay, you need to own that. You need to do the hard work. You need to step into it. You need to know who you're leading. If you haven't talked to them in a while, you don't know what's going on in their life. You don't know how to manage them appropriately. You don't know how to support them as a fellow human. So there's got to be a human component to it. It's got to be an empathetic component to your leadership. You've got to care. You cannot build anything with any team without that empathetic component to the people who are actually doing it. In a high pressure business environment, a high technology environment, the human component can be removed from the decision making. And that's always a mistake, always. So keep it real, keep it authentic, do the hard work, step up, lead, um, and be accountable to your group. If they come back and say this isn't working, it's your job to do the hard work. Sometimes you have to take responsibility for a mistake that's not necessarily yours. Sometimes you have to take the heat, but be a good leader, be in front, and advocate for your team.
Thank you very much, James. You summarized that very well. There's a lot of aspects there, and I know there's so much there. I really appreciate your time, your energy, your attention, all the insights that you shared throughout our conversation today. Thank you so much for being on the show and sharing everything that you did today.
Thank you, man. I appreciate you for inviting me on.